1. The Reign of Terror of Joseph Stalin. Throughout the years, many evil people hid behind masks, but none harbored more evil than Joseph Stalin, the Red Tsar who promised paradise but brought horror. Was he a visionary or a monster? The answer will soon reveal one of the darkest brutalists of humankind. Stalin, born Yosef Bugashvili in 1878, spent his early years in poverty-stricken Georgia in a violent environment. His father, an alcoholic cobbler, beat him violently, while his mother, a religious washerwoman, urged him to become a priest. However, the seminary he attended encouraged bitterness rather than piety. Expelled for his rebellious thoughts, young Stalin turned to radicalism, choosing the name Stalin, Man of Steel, as an awful predication of his future dictatorship. By the 1920s, this clever strategist had outmaneuvered Lenin's successors, capturing power with a smile and a dagger. His collectivization initiatives in the 1930s displaced millions of peasants, causing hunger while he stored grain for propaganda purposes. When Ukraine refused, he weaponized hunger. The Holodomor starved 6 million people, a genocide that he denied with a laugh. One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic, he joked, reducing human suffering to a catchphrase. The Great Purge began, an outbreak of paranoia. Midnight arrests, show trials, and executions were commonplace. Even friends vanished. Sergei Kirov, a former protege, was executed on Stalin's instructions, triggering a wave of terror that claimed 700,000 lives. The gulags were filled with poets, scientists, and regular people whose only crime was to question his workers' paradise. Behind closed doors, Stalin delighted in psychological torment. He forced Politburo members to sing drunkenly for his enjoyment, humiliated wives, and planned his second wife's death. His kid was seized by Nazis and left to die. "I have no prisoners of war," he remarked coldly. By the time Stalin died in 1953, his progress had claimed the lives of 20 million people. Nonetheless, statues bear his name, with his misdeeds disguised as sacrifice. History remembers him as a predator rather than a leader. 2. The Killing Fields of Pol Pot. When it comes to evilness, tyranny is a form of art, and this next artist takes us to the serene nature of Southeast Asia, a land of old temples, rice farms, and rivers that once radiated tranquility. But in the 1970s, those rivers became bright red, because one individual thought Cambodia needed to be purified, that its people must return to year zero, that education, medicine, religion, and even spectacles were evidence of corruption. His name is Pol Pot. Salazar, a gentle Paris-educated teacher, became the mastermind behind one of the most horrific massacres in human history. When the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia in 1975, Pol Pot's goal was not just to dominate the country, but also to totally leave it unfunctional without him. Eliminate cities, erase the cash, erase knowledge, erase the past. Over the course of 4 years, 1.7 to 2 million people, a fifth of Cambodia's population, died. What were the targets? Teachers, monks, doctors, students, anyone who was knowledgeable, even those who appeared knowledgeable. If you wore spectacles, you were thought to be educated and frequently executed. Phnom Penh, Cambodia's capital, was evacuated at gunpoint. Millions of people were compelled to work in the countryside under harsh conditions. Hospitals were closed down, books were burnt, families were separated, language was limited. At night, screaming rang over the rice fields, not from combat, but from torture. People were hauled to prisons such as Tuol Sleng, which was formerly a school but is now a butcher house. There, detainees were photographed, categorized, and tormented until they confessed to crimes they had not committed. Following confession, they were transported to the killing fields, blindfolded, bound, and executed. Bullets were costly, therefore machetes, hammers, and bamboo clubs were utilized instead. Families were broken up, sent across cities, and people were remarried to others according to the new rules. Pol Pot did not kill in the cause of hatred, he killed for purity. In his perverted utopia, there was no place for mercy, love, or thought, just obedience. 3. The Death Tower of Timur. In our society, there are men who see the world only through the glasses of religion, and there was a man who called himself the Sword of Islam, yet left cities in blazing wreckage. Timur, or as the West termed him, Tamerlane. He wasn't satisfied with dominating a nation, he wished to be a storm that swept from Delhi to Damascus, and his name still sends shivers through Central Asia. Timur was born in 1336 in Samarkand in modern-day Uzbekistan. Tamerlane, who was born with just one leg, compensated with a brutal talent for battle. He claimed ancestry from Genghis Khan despite having no royal blood. It doesn't matter. He forged his authority with the blade. During his reign, the Timurid Empire expanded into one of the most terrible conquests in human history. His campaigns were more than just battles. They were bloody symphonies of destruction. When he conquered Delhi in 1398, his forces killed approximately 100,000 prisoners in a single day. Not in the battlefield, in cold blood, after they had surrendered. Following a local rebellion in Isfahan, modern-day Iran, Timur retaliated by massacring the people and erecting 28 towers constructed entirely of human skulls, each containing hundreds of heads. When he took Baghdad, he executed 90,000 people, leaving only destruction and fear in his wake. His battles killed an estimated 17 million people, around 5% of the world population at the time. His kingdom was rich in architecture and literature, but it was founded on burnt corpses and destroyed civilizations. His only message: I was here, and I decided who was worth living. 4. The Tyrant of Wives, Henry VIII. England, the land of royal halls and velvet clothes, a crown loaded with jewels, but far heavier with guilt. Henry VIII, the man who made marriage a weapon and religion a casualty. He was born in 1491 and succeeded to the kingdom at the age of 17. Charismatic, educated, athletic, the ideal Renaissance prince. But beneath the poetry and royal walls was a man driven by a single obsession: a son. Henry's first marriage, Catherine of Aragon, bore him a daughter but no son, so Henry decided that the marriage was cursed. He wanted the annulment. The Pope declined, and in a move that would eternally reshape England, Henry broke away from the Catholic Church, founded the Church of England, and crowned himself as its supreme head. What took place after was more than simply a theological change, it was a cleansing. Between 1536 and 1541, Henry began the dissolution of the monasteries, seizing and demolishing 800 religious buildings, stealing wealth, and expelling monks and nuns. Thousands were displaced, dozens were executed. England's spiritual heart was cut out, not for God, but for wealth and power. And then there were the wives. Henry had 6 total. Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard were executed for supposed adultery. Historians are still debating the accusations, let alone the proof of it all. However, it is evident that both women were used as pawns and then abandoned. Even his beloved Jane Seymour, who had given him the boy he desired, died shortly after childbirth. Political opponents removed. Friends who disagreed executed. Thomas More, his former counselor, was beheaded for refusing to acknowledge Henry's authority over the church. Henry VIII died in 1547, overweight, diseased, and alone, but his rule left terrible scars on religion, monarchy, and the countless who perished simply because they stood in the way of a king who never wanted to be said no. 5. The Starvation Emperor, Chairman Mao. But not all evil humans look unappealing. Some carry angelic smiles and promise paradise, only to offer nothing more than hell's deepest corners right here on Earth. Chairman Mao Zedong, the founding father of the People's Republic of China, and the mastermind behind the Great Chinese Tragedy. Born in 1893, Mao rose to prominence as a revolutionary leader, defeating the Kuomintang and establishing communist authority in 1949. His thoughts became scripture, his words became law. However, underneath the revolutionary chants and red flags lies a terrible hubris. In 1958, Mao started the Great Leap Forward, a plan to industrialize China overnight. Communes were established, steel furnaces were constructed in backyards, farmers were instructed to discard millennia of wisdom, crops were planted too closely or removed, officials misled about yield. What was the result? The most devastating man-made famine in history. Between 1959 and 1961, 30 to 45 million people starved to death. In several provinces, parents sold or ate their children. People ate bark, dirt, clay. There were even reports of cannibalism. However, Mao refused to recognize failure. To speak out against the policy constituted treason. Those who did were silenced. Entire villages vanished. Party members who disclosed the truth were expelled. Then followed the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. Mao released the Red Guards, a group of teenage fanatics trained to demolish the Four Olds, traditional customs, culture, habits, and beliefs. They assaulted instructors, burnt literature, and desecrated shrines. Intellectuals were tortured. Some were made to wear dunce hats and crawl through the streets. Others were fatally beaten with their textbooks. The Cultural Revolution transformed China into a nation that was terrified of thinking for themselves. A generation was lost to terror, brainwashing, and madness, all for the sake of one man's ego. Mao passed away in 1976. However, his legacy lives on, in banknotes, sculptures, and the quiet anguish of millions. 6. The Butcher of Congo, Leopold II. History remembers some monarchs for unifying nations, others for constructing empires, but Leopold II of Belgium is recognized for controlling an entire nation as a private company. Leopold II, born in 1835 to the Belgian royal family, was reared with the goal of ruling more rather than better. As the second king of Belgium, he inherited a modest European country, but his passion was to build an empire of his own. So he plotted. Behind the scenes, he promoted himself as a humanitarian. He portrayed the Congo as a site where he would abolish slavery, spread Christianity, and educate the savages. In reality, he regarded the Congo as a source of rubber and ivory. He established the Congo Free State in 1885, not as a Belgian colony, but as his personal property. From 1885 to 1908, Leopold governed the Congo with no government supervision. Under his commands, local Congolese were enslaved to produce rubber, which became an increasingly valuable commodity throughout the Industrial Revolution. What if quotas weren't met? Entire settlements were burnt down. Families were butchered. Soldiers were instructed to chop off the hands of workers, including youngsters, to demonstrate that they were not wasting ammunition. Yes, hands were used as both cash and proof. Eyewitnesses, missionaries, and whistleblowers reported acts so heinous that they hardly seem real. People were tied up and lashed with the chicote, a hippo hide whip capable of tearing a man's flesh to the bone. Children are held captive until their parents meet work expectations. The estimated death toll is 10 million. That's half the population gone in less than 20 years. And the worst part, Leopold earned a fortune. He did not visit most of the Congo, but he constructed palaces in Belgium, threw parties, and was acclaimed as a civilizing hero across Europe. He never faced a trial. He died rich, comfortable, and virtually unpunished. Despite being one of history's most brutal imperialists, his monument may still be found in several locations.